Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again, and welcome to the Batman I Believe In, the Bat-centric channel where we talk about anything and everything as long as it pertains to the Cape Crusader. And on this week's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Mcfarlane Toys DC Multiverse, Batman Who Laughs.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman!
Right on, children of the screen, where here you have him out of the package. In terms of his accessories and other accoutrements that come with him, we of course have the sickle up here and the knife. Then moving on, we have the collector's card that comes with it, which is the Jacques artwork from the Batman Who Laughs solo book. And then we have the DC Multiverse stand. So yeah, in terms of these accessories, it's pretty bare. Combine that with the fact that these weapons are made out of the flimsiest plastic that you can imagine. They do not fit in his hands, which again, we get trigger hands with this figure. On top of that, these are very, very large, too large for the hands. So you really have to fight to get them in there. And then because of the fact that they're too big, they're flimsy, and the hands aren't made for these specific weapons, you end up having a lot of trouble keeping them from getting all messed up and looking natural as they sit. But that's the accessories. That's all you really get with him, other than you get this guy right here, a third of the little mini Batmobile figure. So, you know, those are the accessories. Moving on to the actual figure itself, let's take a closer look. In terms of the figure itself, the aesthetics of it are overall pretty good. The sculpting on the figure is absolutely fantastic, with really the only places that the sculpt gets disrupted or broken up being the wrists, where we have the ball pegs that we'll be talking about here in a little bit, and then also where the legs connect to the groin. There's definitely a big gap, like you see with a lot of these figures from the Mcfarlane Toys line, where you can kind of just see all the apparatuses that make them move up inside there. Beyond that, when it goes into the rest of the sculpt, everything looks really nice. It flows together pretty well. The elbows don't have the problem that I usually have with the elbows on the Mcfarlane, where it looks like a piece of machinery. In this case, they've managed to make it look like the coat. And a very similar thing for the knees. The coat itself is sculpted very nicely. Really, I would say in terms of the aesthetics, my only real big complaint on this figure would actually be that the paint is a little bit sloppy. Now, on a figure like this, I don't expect it to be pristine and beautiful, and a lot of the silver affectations on the coat and the buckles are done very, very well, and I even appreciate the fact that in order to make it look more like the Jacques art, they put a little extra red in around his chin. I don't actually like the way it looks, but I appreciate the effort that went into that. However, some of the other places, specifically on his head and around the metal pieces on his head, the paint job has a lot of slop going on about it. So overall, the aesthetics of the figure are not bad per se, but there's definitely some areas that could be improved. Right on, guys, so next let's go on and move on to the articulation, starting off with the head. So on the head, you get a surprising amount of back, considering the collar and how big it is. A surprising amount of forward as well, although that does reveal the apparatus on the back of the figure. You can kind of see where the joints separate. And you get a bit of side to side, again, more than you would think with how high the collar and the shoulders on this figure are. And unfortunately, you only get a bit of side to side because, yeah, while the collar doesn't really interfere with much of the other functions of this particular joint, it definitely messes with those. So then moving on down to the arms, on the shoulders of the arms, they both will go up a pretty good bit, only really stopping whenever the shoulder pads on the coat get in the way. Then they can go they can go all the way around. You just have to accommodate those shoulder pads again for part of it. And that'll work on both of them. Yes, it will. Alright, so then we have bicep swivels on both sides, which is very nice. Then moving on down into the elbows, we have a double jointed elbow, which goes a really good distance. And again, the sculpt that they managed to use on these elbow pieces incorporates it pretty well and doesn't make it look too ghastly. So yeah, that works perfectly well on both of them. And here again is my biggest point of contention when it comes to the mixing of how the articulation and the aesthetics go together, which is the wrists. Specifically on a figure like the Batman Who Laughs, you have an issue where, because he is so skinny, and the way that they need the coat and the hands to be applied in order to get full movement, you end up with what is clearly just a little ball there. It doesn't look like a wrist. It doesn't look like it completely breaks the flow of the sculpt and everything, and makes the hands end up looking way too big, despite the fact that they are perfectly sized, you know, proportionately for this figure. But from those balls, we get an all the way around, obviously, and then we get a pivot that goes looking like about 90 degrees either way. So yeah, you can get a decent amount of range of movement from it, and I am very happy with that movement, but man, do those things look ugly. Anyway, moving on down, because of the way that this jacket is sculpted all as one piece, you're not going to get much in the way of movement out of the torso, but you can get it to, let's see, you can actually get a decent amount of back from it. Moving forward, on the other hand, is definitely a bit of a problem. There's a little bit, but really, really not much, about as much as you would expect from the midsection with that piece on top of it. So then moving on down to the hips. So the hips whoa, okay. So, as I mentioned in the previous part about the aesthetics, the crotch joints that they have, the system that they have on these figures is really, really ugly. And it's visible on every figure. It really disrupts the sculpt. But normally you get a pretty good range of movement outward and just in general from those legs. And on this figure I'm seeing that because of the way that the pants have to be sculpted and the way that the coat fits over it, that definitely is not the case. There's definitely not the full range of movement that we're used to there. In terms of front, they can really not go forward all that much. Now, if you use the ab crunch, you can get him to get into kind of a sitting position, but with this coat cape, you're never going to be able to actually get him to sit on anything except for maybe a stool if you're lucky. So not a whole lot going on there. And in terms of back, again, right there, that is mostly that ab crunch, which, you know what, is a little bit better than I gave it credit for, if it's giving me that much range of motion trying to kick backwards. But yeah, the legs basically do not move backwards at all. Another issue that I have with these is there is no thigh cut in this, and there's also just barely any pivot at the actual hip, which makes getting him into dynamic poses frankly pretty difficult, especially with him being as top heavy as he is. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on down to the knees now. With the knees on these guys, you do get a double jointed knee, which is fully functional. It's not the prettiest thing, but it does not completely break up the sculpt or completely disrupt it. Again, you know, like, that is a really nice knee joint, but without something here to be able to move the thigh a little bit more, getting to utilize that joint properly, and then with the legs also not being able to go up any further, it's going to be very difficult for you to utilize that in the way that it would be nice to utilize it. But in terms of functionality for the joint itself, it's pretty decent. So then moving on down to the ankles, which I'm actually very happy with on this particular figure, because usually we have the same issues with the ankles that we have with the wrists. But in this one, because of the size of Joker, and because of the way that they have the boot designed, it works out pretty nicely. And for that, you get all the way around, and then you get a pretty decent range forward and backward. And then, of course, you get the toe articulation as well, which is pretty cool. So all in all, the articulation on this figure is not the worst I've ever seen. It's not absolutely abysmal, but there are a few little things on it, like a thigh cut and things like figuring out a better way to do the wrists so that you don't completely ruin the integrity of what is otherwise a really fantastic sculpt, with these little places that just break it up and completely ruin all the other good work that's been put into the articulation. Right on, children of the screen. So in general, those are my basic thoughts on the Mcfarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Who Laughs action figure. It's pretty decent. Not the worst I've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination. It has some really great things going for it, but for every one of those things that's really nice about it, it has something that also detracts from the overall quality of the figure. It's like point for point on this one. But I have decided that on these action figure reviews, I'm going to start actually giving a rating for the different aspects of the figure that I'm looking at. So we're going to start that today, and this is my 5 Batarang system, with 5 out of 5 Batarangs being the best, obviously. So in terms of the overall presentation within the package and the accessories and things of that nature, like the Build-A-Car is nice, especially when it only comes with 3 figures, but honestly, I don't really care about that. The card is well done, and I will at least give them that they attempted on this particular figure to actually mimic the artwork in the card with the paint job on the face and things of that nature. But man, these weapons are really disappointing, and there's just not a lot there. So unfortunately, in terms of the presentation and accessories, it's going to be getting 2 out of 5 Batarangs. In terms of the overall aesthetics of the figure, as I said, sculpt is great. The proportions are very nice. The only things really causing any problems for me here are the little bit of paint scuff and smudge that's on the helmet piece, the wrists, and again, the kind of groin crotch area down here where just all the beautiful work put into the sculpt just breaks down in those places. And same with the paint job. It's just like these few little flaws are just highlighted by how wonderful everything else around it is. So in terms of the general aesthetics, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be generous and give it 4 out of 5 Batarangs. In terms of the articulation on this figure, it's really weird. I was noticing as I was playing around with this guy that despite the fact that his shape and general size is completely different, I can pretty much get him into the same poses as the Hellbat armor, which is ridiculous because the Hellbat armor is much heavier, it's much bigger, its feet are huger. There are definitely things that I should be able to do with this figure that I cannot do with that figure and vice versa, but it seems to be about the same. The articulation on it definitely has some high points, things that are way better than I thought, such as the head and the ab crunch, both forward and back. I'm very happy with the way that the knees and elbows work out. But again, the hip section, the fact that on this figure for some reason, despite the fact that you're still getting all that breakage of the sculpt, you're not getting an optimal range of motion from him, and you would like to be able to have this character do the kind of things Batman does with the jumping and the crouching and the kicking and all that kind of stuff. So the knees are nice, but with the hips and with no, like, you know, thigh swivel, like, there's very limited things you can do. You can kind of have him in the pose I have him in now, or you can have him standing straight up. But that's pretty much the only ways he's going to balance, and this thing's not going to help you out. So, overall, even though it has a good number of points of articulation, and most of them are pretty well, you know, executed, again, having just those few little things really hurts it. So, in terms of the articulation, I'm going to be giving this guy 3 out of 5 Batarangs. In terms of the figure overall, like I said, there are a lot of things I like, there are a lot of things that I don't like. It's about hand in hand, but overall I really enjoy this character, as you can see, you know, sporting my Batman Who Laughs stuff for today. I enjoy the character, and I'm really happy to have a representation of him in my collection. So all in all, I'm going to give the figure 3 out of 5 Batarangs. Right on, children of the screen, that is my review on the Mcfarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Who Laughs action figure. But let me know down in the comments below. Have you picked up this figure? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Is this your favorite figure of all time, or could you have waited for something else down the line? I really want to know your thoughts on it. Also, if you haven't liked this video, please leave a like and share it with some friends. Also, if you're not subscribed, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can check out all the Bat-tastic content we have coming out here in the future. Once again, children of the screen, thank you very much. See you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Nerd Scum.